Appreciate you being here with us on Birds 365. Thanks for streaming in with Mac and Mac. And streaming in with us is Ralph Vacchiano of FoxSports.com. I've only known Ralph for decades. I used to have him on all the time when he was covering the Giants day in, day out for the newspaper up in New York. Ralph, we certainly want your Giant opinion, but we're going to get your Eagle opinion too, because you cover the entire division.
Sure.
We're trying to figure this out. What the hell happened? How the hell can they get it righted? Is this season now just adrift at this time from someone who's following the Eagles but doing so from outside the market? What's the Eagles' problem?
Well, there's a bunch, and the weird thing about it is it's not really a new problem. I know they've lost 3 straight and that's the focus, but all of these things that have gone wrong during those 3 games were things we saw early in the season that they got away with. I think 3 of their biggest problems for me are obviously Jalen Hurts is turning the ball over like crazy, which is still all these years later. It's the Tom Coughlin lesson beaten into my head that, turnovers determine every single game, and he's turning it over. They're going to lose. So that's one problem, which he was doing earlier in the season as well. The second problem, I think on offense, they don't commit to the run as much as they should. Sometimes it's they don't commit to it early, or sometimes like in the game in Seattle, they commit to it early, then forget about it in big spots and decide to take these crazy deep shots when they should just be running the ball down an opponent's throat. And the third one, which really dates back to last year, is this is not a good tackling defense. There were games last year where they were really gashed on the run because the linebackers and secondary couldn't stop guys. Once they get through the defensive line, you can pile up a lot of yardage. And now we're starting to see that again the last few weeks. Teams like the Buffalo Bills ran like crazy on them because they had a hard time tackling. And, even in the secondary on short passes, they have a hard time tackling sometimes, or even, getting in position to tackle. So those are the 3 big problems. And, but again, I've kind of seen that all year long. It's just really starting to hurt them now.
Ralph, I would say they have a bigger problem, and they have significant on-field problems. You just mentioned some of them. But before I get to them, and there's plenty of them, I want to get to the off-the-field problems, because I want to pick your brain how the rest of the league and the rest of the division is looking at what went on in Philadelphia. Freaky Fridaying, I'd like to say, Sean Desai and Matt Patricia. It's unheard of. People go back to Baltimore when John Harbaugh fired Cam Cameron for Jim Caldwell. He fired him. He's out of the building. That you could argue. That Sean's here. Have you ever seen anything like it? And what is the reaction in the rest of the division in the league? Because they did Sean Desai dirty comments from a couple of people.
Yeah, I guess I've never seen it exactly like this. I've seen it sort of like it in terms of, head coaches taking over usually it could be either the offensive or defensive play calling, but they don't necessarily demote, which is, I guess they didn't do here technically. They don't demote the coordinator, but having another assistant sort of take over the coordinator's job while the coordinator is still there is unprecedented for me, certainly of any of the teams I've covered. Every time it's happened, even with the head coach, that coordinator is out at the end of the year. So there's no doubt Sean Desai is gone. It's, I guess, a tribute to him that he's willing to stay in this situation. And, I'm sure there's contractual and money reasons why he did too, but it's clear that where this is going, he's not going to be the defensive coordinator next season. And, the reaction that I've gotten around the league is a couple of things. One is this is usually a panic move when it happens.
Yes.
It's does not send a really good message, but, sometimes you feel it's necessary. You have to do it, but it's really odd for a 10-3 team to do it. That's why it makes it even seem like it's more of a panic, because a lot of the teams around the league would love to have the Eagles' problems, and things were going generally good. Usually you can fix that with the coaches you have when you're still on top of the league.
Kind of like if you're sleeping with a beautiful woman and no one really knows what's going down there in the room afterward, and somebody comes in and tells you, Well, you just can't go upstairs anymore. You can sleep on the couch. We've got on demand. Feel free to order up whatever great shows you want overnight, but you don't get to sleep with the beautiful woman anymore. Just weird what the Eagles did to Sean Desai last week. Ralph, need your Giant expertise.
Sure.
The whole Tommy Cutlets thing has been overdone and overblown. All right, his mother makes his bed, still cooks for him. His agent looks like he should be on The Sopranos. All that is fun stuff, but it really doesn't mean a hell of a lot. I actually think he's played okay. He's made some plays and some throws that have impressed me. And for a guy who was third string, not activated on game days, to be able to come in and throw the football like I've seen him throw it, I've actually been impressed by him. It seems to me like he's at least taking control of this locker room with the Giants winning 3 of their last 4 games. Is this Tommy DeVito's team?
Well, for the moment, it is. It's a cute story, and good for him. He's making the most of his 15 minutes of fame. He's certainly proven to me that he has a future in the league. You're right. I mean, some of the throws that he made, a couple of touchdown throws he made were incredible. He can make plays by running the ball as well. Clearly, he's got the respect of his teammates and all of that. But when you step back and look at the big picture, it's not like he's throwing for 350 yards a game. It's not like the Giants are putting up 30 points a game. They are still, under his direction, a terrible offense and terrible passing game. What he's shown me is he's got the skills. And, he's got – I'd be comfortable with him if I'm the Giants next year as my primary backup. Is he a starter? I'm still in the Daniel Jones camp where –
Are you really?
I am, because everybody harps on the first 5 or 6 games of this season when the offensive line was horrific, when Saquon Barkley wasn't there, and they were absolutely struggling. But everybody forgets last year when Daniel Jones carried a bad team to the playoffs. He dragged them and to a playoff win on the road. So injuries aside, and I'm concerned about his neck and concerned about his knee, but I think Daniel Jones is a much better quarterback than Tommy DeVito. If the Giants think otherwise, they better get somebody in the draft, because Tommy DeVito does not look to me like a guy who is that elite quarterback that you need to win in this league. He looks like a guy who would be. You think Daniel Jones is an elite quarterback? I think he has the potential to be. I don't think he's there yet, but I do think last year he was, he put up numbers last year that were good with no receivers, getting killed behind an offensive line. He had an ability to lead that team, which really impressed me. I think he's got some skills that, in the right situation, they can win with him. I don't think he's top 10, top 15, but I think he's better than Tommy DeVito for sure.
Yeah. I think, yeah. But I think the worst thing, and I said it last year, Ralph, at the time, the worst thing for the Giants was winning that road playoff game.
Yes.
Because at the time, Minnesota had Ed Donatel as their one of the worst defenses I've ever seen in my life. I mean, and it seriously, I'm not, that's not hyperbole. It was, and they've turned it around with Brian Flores this year. It was really bad. And I think, look, it's exciting to win a road playoff game, but in many ways, I think long-term that hurt the Giants because they thought they're a little bit better than they really were. And they should have gotten the course correction when they got to Philadelphia in the playoffs, but I don't think they did. But yeah, when we're talking Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, I mean, my question is Daniel Jones good enough? Do you have to go a third avenue? It's not Tommy DeVito. He's clearly better than Tommy, but is he good enough to get you where you want to go? Because I think his ceiling is maybe winning that one playoff game against a team that has issues like Minnesota last season.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think that, for the Giants, they believe that he can be elite. They believe he can be their Eli Manning. There was a time where nobody thought Eli Manning could do what he did in the Super Bowl.
That's true.
I think that if you put the right team around Daniel Jones, you get him some weapons, you have a good defense to support him, you can win with him. You can maybe make who knows in the playoffs, you can maybe make a little bit of a run. But, is he the guy? Is he a Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts or Dak Prescott who you can get on his back and have him carry you to a Super Bowl? Maybe. I don't think so. I think he'd have to really step up his game to do that. I mean, he certainly hasn't done it so far. And I also agree with you, by the way, that, last year was definitely fool's gold for the Giants. I was saying that all off season long when people were trumpeting this team is, watch out, they're a contender now. They were always going to take a step back. They believed a little internally that they're a little better than they were. I think that winning that playoff game kind of forced their hand a little bit with Daniel Jones and giving him the contract. I think they believe in him, but I think that didn't have choice once they got to the playoffs. They had to bring him back. So it did, it made this year look even worse because a lot of people inside and outside had higher expectations that were completely unrealistic.
They used a relatively high draft pick on Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. And we have the Quez Watkins effect here in Philadelphia, which I chide the coach on all the time. Oh, he can fly. He makes other guys open because he's stretching the defense. Except for the fact when they throw the ball to him, he doesn't catch it and or the other team intercepts it. Is he really stretching the defense? Hyatt is a guy who absolutely can get down the field, and he's averaging 18 yards a catch. So he's doing what he was advertised to be able to do, but he hasn't done all that much of it, and he hasn't gotten one in the end zone yet. Cut him some slack because he's on a rookie. He's on a rookie curve. Where are the Giants at with Jalen Hyatt? Can he become one of their top 2 wide receivers and be a league average 1 or 2 wide receiver in this league?
He's another guy that they weren't using much early when Daniel Jones was the starter, and they've gotten to him a little bit more late in the season as he's developed. Can he be I think he can be a number 2 type receiver, a stretch the field type of guy. I don't know yet that he has the skills to be, up there with any of the number 1 receivers in the league. I think he is I think he's got the potential to do a lot, but one of the knocks on him coming out of college was, he didn't run all the routes and, he's more of just a speed guy. He's got to get used to a lot more than just being the deep threat to be that number 1 receiver. The problem with him as a deep threat with the Giants is no matter how fast he is and how strong-armed the quarterback is, if you're going to go to him down the field, he actually needs time to get down the field. And Giants quarterbacks do not get a lot of time behind that offensive line to throw the ball. And that was Daniel Jones' problem early, why they barely used Jalen Hyatt, is Jones was dropping back, and as soon as he set his feet, the pass rush was on top of him. Or he had to run outside the pocket, which makes it harder to go downfield. So if they ever get protection, they could use Hyatt for a good deep threat, but to be a number 1 receiver, you got to do more than that.
Yeah, it's amazing how long the Giants have been trying to fix that offensive line. That obviously they've tried. They've taken another, and they just can't get it right. Andrew Thomas is a very good player, but
that's it.
Yeah, it's amazing how they haven't been able to at least improve to an average sort of degree in this particular league. But you mentioned something that was interesting to me because Jody and I, before you popped on, Ralph, were discussing Jalen Hurts, and you mentioned you still had him in that category of guys who can, and he already did, lift a team to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You haven't been wavered over this stretch because a lot of people here are wavered on if Jalen Hurts is really that type of quarterback now.
I waver only in the sense that I don't think he's having that special year because of the turnovers. When you look at his numbers are on pace or beyond what he did last year for the most part. And yet we're still looking at it as, these things don't look very good, which they don't come on the Eagles standard. It's the turnovers that really alarm me. I don't waver because I wonder if there's a few factors in that. I wonder how much his knee is more of a problem than we thought it was all season long. If you're hurt and focused on that a little bit, maybe your, decision making is a little off. Maybe your grip on the ball is a little less. I don't know. I think that early on in the season, he looked out of sync to me. He looked indecisive at times, and I wonder how much of that was the change in play callers. I don't know how much different the scheme of the new offensive coordinator was, and how much he had to get used to that, but he didn't look like it was very comfortable at first. And the other reason I don't waver is you've seen quarterbacks have really bad turnover numbers and then bounce back the next year. And Dak Prescott's a great example of that. So I can see Jalen Hurts next year coming back and looking like the old Jalen Hurts.
And that's what the Eagle fans are hoping for this week. Ralph, I've been saying all week I'm scared from an Eagle perspective from this game because they're not good against the run. Last year, they were the best team in the league against the run. This year, they're well in the second half. Linebacker play, safety play, even the DTs haven't been as good as they were last year when it comes to stopping the run. How many carries Saquon Barkley get? If I set the over-under at 24 carries for Saquon Barkley in this game on Monday afternoon, you going under or over?
I'd probably go over. It's a big workload for Saquon Barkley, but that's the way I look at the Eagles and how to beat them is run the ball like crazy. The only way Saquon Barkley doesn't get that many carries, I think, is if they decide to let Tommy DeVito run a little bit as well, and he takes 9 or 10 of them away. But that's the vulnerability in the Eagles right now. If you can establish that run, you can handle that defensive line, which just is not as good as it was last season, and you don't allow the pass rush, which has been inconsistent, to pin back its ears and go after you. You've got a shot. Now, I don't know that the Giants necessarily have a shot because if you want to run, you got to block, and they're still the offensive line still isn't good, so they'll have issues. But that's the formula. I mean, Tommy DeVito is not going to beat this team by throwing for 300 yards. If they beat the Eagles, it'll be because Saquon Barkley has 150.
Yeah. How is Saquon's mindset these days, Ralph? I mean, to be in that type of situation, you just mentioned he's got to be the workhorse. Running backs don't get paid in this league. He went through, they made the 1-year deal. He's got to think about his long-term future. And you're showing up to a game that doesn't mean all that much, and you got to carry the football 30 times and the wear and tear, and that affects things down the road. Any signs of that creeping in to his mindset?
I don't think so. I think he's handled everything like a real pro. He's clearly not happy about his financial situation. And, I get it. If I'm a running back, I wouldn't be happy. If I were a general manager and owner, I understand why you're not paying running backs anymore. But, and I think his unhappiness has come through a lot, but not on the field, not in the meeting rooms, where he still is doing his job. There's no indication that he wants to sit out and rest. He wants to prove, I'm worth this. I think it has helped that the Giants have been really honest with him, from my understanding, about how far they're willing to go. It's not like they told him, we want you, and then didn't make an offer to keep him. They just didn't make an offer that was good enough. And they've been telling him the reasons and telling him where they can go and how they want to try again this offseason. So I think he feels like, okay, they're being honest with me. I'm going to prove to them I'm worth what I want, and then we'll see where it goes. He came to the conclusion when he didn't hold out in training camp that sitting out was not going to increase his value, which he's probably right, because running back values aren't going up anyway. And if you're going to be a problem about it, your value is even less. So he's done everything that they could ask. And, I would imagine even in a lost season, that'll continue down the stretch.
Can they put the franchise tag on him again this offseason?
They can. It's a little bit more expensive. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I think it's like 12 point something million dollars. They might. They have, I think Xavier McKinney is the other guy who could possibly get the franchise tag, though I would doubt it. So they could do it again. I think they do want to sign him, I'll say long-term, but, it would be one of those deals that's looks long-term, but is really 2 years when they can get out of it. And I think that's, they love him. They think, and correctly, he's the best player on their offense. He just gets hurt, and running backs have a shelf life, and you can't ignore that reality in the NFL.
All right, Barkley is their best player. Are they getting their second best player back from injury this week in Darren Waller?
Yeah, he played last week, and I think
he did. Okay,
he did. Yeah, and he had a couple of moments where he looked like the Darren Waller they expected. Get a short pass over the middle, take off for a medium-sized gain. So, that certainly will help Tommy DeVito have that kind of weapon. It's really, when you look at that offense, he's by far their best weapon. I'm still not a fan of any of their receivers. And Darius Slayton is a good number 3 receiver to me. Jalen Hyatt's a deep threat if you have time. Everybody else are just sort of filler guys to me. They signed Paris Campbell, who can't even get on the field anymore. So you get Darren Waller, you've got a legitimate weapon over the middle where, by the way, the Eagles have their most trouble. If I'm the Giants, not only am I running the ball, I'm attacking those linebackers. I'm going right at them every chance I get. And if you put Darren Waller on a crossing route, make them try to tackle him, which is not always a guarantee.
Yeah. I would just say one thing. Saquon's their best offensive player. Maybe Darren Waller's number 2, but their best player is Dexter Lawrence. How is Dexter? I saw he had a hamstring issue. Is he good to go?
I believe he didn't practice yesterday. I don't know what his status is today. I think they're concerned about him. It's hamstrings linger. He's a big man, which makes him linger even more. Mm-hmm. I would assume if there's any way to have him go, he's still probably going to be limited, and they have a very, very thin defensive tackle rotation. That's the flip side of this, where if I'm the Eagles, man, if you're ever going to establish the run, this is the game to do it, because they just, especially if Dexter Lawrence can't go, the Giants have nothing up the middle of that defense until you get to Bobby Okereke, their linebacker. But down that line, you can create a lot of holes there, and they should run for 200 yards if they really commit to it.
Ralph, as you can well understand here on Birds 365, we're all narrow focused in on Giants and Eagles, but Cowboys have a pretty damn important game this week. And we got some Cowboy fans here on the stream who like to go back and forth with all our Eagle guys with comments. They got over a hurdle 2 weeks ago when they beat the snot out of the Eagles in Dallas. They hadn't beaten a good team all year. Their schedule was what it was, and they had just beaten up on the sisters of the poor, beating them up pretty damn badly, which would include the Giants and the Jets. Giants twice, Jets once. They own New York, but they hadn't beaten a good team, and then they beat the Eagles. Then last week they had a chance to beat a good team on the road, which they haven't done yet, and the Bills smacked them in the face. They got another chance against the Dolphins in Miami this week. How badly did the whole matching up with the Eagles and one loss and tiebreaker, all that aside, just mindset, Dallas Cowboys, if they want to do what everybody wants to do, which is make a Super Bowl run, at some point you're going to have to win a big game against a good team on the road. This is their last chance to do so this year against Miami. How do you like the Cowboys this week against the Dolphins?
I don't love them because they struggle against good teams on the road. That's right now the next hurdle. There's always a series of hurdles with the Cowboys, right? You start to believe in them, and then, okay, well, Dak can't win the big game. Okay, he can't win the big game, but he can't win the big game on the road. They can't stop the run, or they can stop the run, but their pass rush is inconsistent. Whatever. There's always something with them, and this is the latest hurdle, but it's a significant one because the odds, I think, given the Eagles' schedule, are pretty good that the Eagles are going to win the NFC East, and that means the Cowboys in the playoffs are going on the road. They're going to have to probably get through Philadelphia and San Francisco in order to get to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, if they can't, what have they lost to? They lost to Arizona. They've lost in Philadelphia. They lost, obviously, in Buffalo, and they lose in Miami. And San Francisco is the other one. I'm sorry.
Pummeled.
Yeah, exactly. And if you have all that on your resume, at some point, you really, I think, on a team has to wonder, what do we have to do to win these games? And now you're all on the road the rest of the way. So, to me, this is big. It's a tough get-right game for them because, obviously, the Dolphins are really good. But I think if they win, even if they win by a point and some freak occurrence at the end of the game, at least then they can feel better and say, okay, we did it. Now we know how to do it, and you go in the playoffs and take your chances. But if they don't, boy, that's going to be hanging over them. It's going to make it even tougher for them in the playoffs.
At Ralph Vacchiano, make sure you follow Ralph on X, formerly known as Twitter. The NFC East reporter for Fox Sports does a tremendous job. We got to talk about one more team. Nobody cares about the Washington Commanders, but I do. I think they're the most interesting of the bunch, Ralph, for this reason. New owner. We know him well here. Josh Harris, owner of the Sixers as well. Has he gotten answers? Typically, when you get a new owner, he wants his own people in there. So I would think Ron Rivera is probably not going to be back. And if he's not back, does anything gotten answers on Sam Howell, does that even matter? Because you're going to bring in a new coach with a new thought process, a new philosophy. Has Josh gotten any answers, really? Or has he just got to wait until he remakes the organization?
I think it probably hasn't gotten any answers, right? I mean, I think he knows the big answer, I guess, is he knows that Ron Rivera is going to be fired, and so is Martin Mayhew, the general manager. I think that they know that, he gave them a year so he can evaluate and see what they could do, and it didn't work out. He got a year's look at Sam Howell, but you're exactly right. You bring in the next coach and general manager, they might be sitting on possibly as high as the number 2 pick, probably in the top 5, with a lot of quarterbacks sitting there at the top of the draft, and they'll have a shot at them. As I think Sam Howell can be really good. I think he showed a lot of promise, at least through the first 12 or 13 weeks. He slumped the last few, but none of that matters at all if the new GM comes in and says, I have the number 2 pick, and boy, do I love Caleb Williams, or boy, do I love Drake May, or I'm at, 5 and I've got a chance at Jaden Daniels and I love him. That's all that matters. I get the feeling that Josh Harris is committed to whoever the new regime is, letting them make the decisions. It's not like he's going to say, no, I love Sam Howell, we got to keep him. He's going to leave that up to the next football guys. So there aren't going to be any answers until we know who those next football guys are. And, we're still probably a month away from that.
Very true. All right, Ralph, we need you on the record. There are 3 potential outcomes here. Giants pull a pretty major upset, beating the Eagles on Sunday. Eagles do exactly what they're supposed to do and win easily, like they did basically all 3 times against the Giants last year, or somewhere in the middle. And that's a pretty good pretty good hole you can drive a truck through. 13 points. The Eagles are favored by the Eagles over. Are you going Giants upset, Eagles dominate the way they should, or it's a competitive game? Give me a score on Eagles-Giants Christmas.
I think the Eagles will dominate. I think they're smart enough to know that they have to keep this game on the ground. I would think something along the lines of 31-14 Eagles. Maybe it's a little nerve-wrackingly close in the third quarter, but this is still not a good Giants team. They're just, for all the excitement of Tommy DeVito, there's a lot of things they can't do, and this is such a big step up in class. So I will think the Eagles, in the end, will look like they've dominated. And I'll say this, if they barely win, or if they somehow actually lose this game, that is really panic time in Philadelphia.
Oh, man.
Oh, my God. I would question whether they have the ability to even win a playoff game at that point.
If they lose the game on Monday when you're driving home, Rob, do you take Walt Whitman or Benjamin Franklin going back over to Jersey after?
It's usually the Walt Whitman, I think.
Walt Whitman, yeah. Feel free to stop and help any Eagle fan from jumping, because
there
probably
might be a
will
line
be some ready to go over the top. Ralph, great stuff. We always love when we have you on. Thank you very much for doing so. We'll certainly get you back on again sometime during the playoffs. Thanks for doing it today.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Ralph Vacchiano, you can read him at foxsports.com. It's been covering the NFL for years, specifically the Giants for a lot of those years, but covering the entire division these days for Fox. All right, McDonald, McMullen, Mac and Mac coming back to put a bow on the show and give you our predictions on the Eagles and Giants on Christmas.